Well, hello there. Old Glasgow pubs, or some of them, and what happened to them. This isn't so much a video as a series of still images. I'm going to use black and white photographs and compare those with images from Google Street View. I'm using Google Street View simply because it'll save me having to traipse all over the city to take images of the frontages of premises, which isn't always easy. You've got traffic and stuff in the way. Most of the black and white images date to the 1930s. There's some earlier, there's some later, but most of them I think are around about the 1930s. And I think basically what we're looking at is change. I wanted to just compare how things looked back then to how they look now. In most cases, the pub is still a pub, but it looks very different. And in some cases, it's the pub's no longer there, but the building and the premises are still there, and it's now some sort of shop, some sort of retail concern. And it's just interesting to see that change. In many cases where the pub is no longer there, you're sometimes struggling to imagine exactly where the pub was. You're looking at the building, you're thinking, where exactly was this thing? And often when you look at the first floor windows, the spacing of those windows, the size of the windows, and any stone carving around those windows, and compare what you see now with what's in the black and white photo, that can, in most cases, give you a good handle on exactly where that pub was. And in a few cases, I think you'll be surprised. You think, was that a pub? Did a pub used to be there? Surely not. I think for me, apart from the face of change, one of the main things for me in this video is just how good pubs looked in the old days. And we are just looking at the frontages here. You've got a mixture of carved wood panels, stained glass, in some cases painted glass. You've got acid-etched glass and cut glass, and all these things come together to create a really attractive frontage that is designed to draw you in. And when we compare those images with Google Street View, when the pub is still there, in most cases it doesn't look as good as it did back in the 1930s or whenever. There are a few exceptions, as we'll find out in due course, but in most cases the pub just looks a bit bland, and what was once a grand exterior is now covered over or obliterated under a coat of harling. I'm inside a Lauriston bar just now. The inside has got a perfectly preserved 1960s interior, but we're not looking at interiors, we're looking at exteriors. The Lauriston bar is featured in what follows, and I think once again, if you don't know, I think you'll be surprised at how the exterior of this pub used to look. So sit back and enjoy what follows. Before I begin proper, I just want to give you a brief glimpse of what we're dealing with as far as the changing face of Glasgow is concerned. Huge areas of the city have been swept away, and for me, to find quite a few premises, once pubs, that have survived is nothing short of a small miracle. This map shows a part of Springburn in 1910. If you look close, you can see the letters P and H at a corner. PH stands for Public House,
in this case the boundary bar, as shown here around the beginning of the 20th century. And this is the same view today, courtesy of Google Street View, and practically everything shown on the old map has gone. So let us begin with the Scotia Bar in Stockwell Street. This was it in 1929, during alterations. 1 year later, it looked like this, with a new exterior that pretty much still exists today. Of course, the main thing about both photos is you can see that it was once part of a tenement. You can also see that it used to sit beside the Metropole Theatre, which sadly burned down in 1961. This is it today, and my main question would probably be, what happened to that lovely old lamppost? To Norfolk Street in the Gorbals now, and on the opposite corner from the Lauriston pub we have a good example of just how decorative pub exteriors once were. The photo dates to 1933 and shows an attractive mix of granite, decorated tiles and acid-etched or cut glass windows. We can also see the ubiquitous advert for Bass Pale Ale. Today, the premises are no longer a pub, and the exterior looks rather bland in comparison. On the opposite corner, across Bridge Street, the exterior of the Lauriston Bar looks none too inspiring these days. You'd never know that it used to look like this. The photo dates to 1933, and oh my goodness, would you just look at that. Apart from showing us another building that is cut down in size, we can see delightful acid-etched or cut glass windows and, of course, adverts for Bass. What a stunning exterior. Today's uninspiring facade gives little clue of the 1960s architectural gem that exists inside today, as you may have seen in my introduction. By the Hielanman's umbrella now and the Grant Arms, captured in 1930. Again, it's a very attractive frontage, one that would entice potential customers inside. I'm not convinced that today's exterior would do the same, but it's good to see that it's still a pub. To Maryhill Road now, beside the library, and the changing face of the punch bowl. Here it is in 1937, with carved wood panelling and stained glass windows. And here it is 2 years later, modernised and looking a tarred Art Deco-ish. As with so many old pubs, today's look isn't a lot to write home about. To the East End now, and a corner pub that has always held a certain fascination for me. I'm not sure why. I just pass by, stop to look, and be strangely fascinated. So, when I chanced upon this photo, probably dating to the 1960s, well, it blew me away. It's at the corner of London Road and Charlotte Street, and yet again we have another tenement cut down in size and with a pub at ground level. The Braemar Bar. A very interesting one now. Well, they're all interesting, aren't they? And another example of a building reduced in height. It's the Bristol Bar at 600 Duke Street and sporting quite a few Union Jacks. You would never know that it once looked like this. Let's pause for a moment and catch our breath. Just look at it, and I know you're thinking, that's the White Horse. It can't possibly be the same pub or the same premises. Well, look closer. If we zoom in just above the corner door, you'll see two carved heads. And if we zoom in on today's Google Street View image, yup, two carved heads. It is indeed the same premises. The old photo, dating to 1939, shows adverts for Bass and Bottle, Guinness Stout, and Robert Younger's ales. What a lovely old pub exterior. To the south side of the city now, and another example of a cuddly old pub frontage. It's the Kirk House in 1939. Wood panels, acid-etched or cut glass windows, and even what looks like some painted glass. I want to be in there. Today, the Kirk House still exists. A bit to the north of the city now, and it's the Balmore Bar in Saracen Street in 1938. Those large windows would have let in a lot of light, and although looking a bit plain, it is nevertheless an attractive frontage. These days, the exterior looks much the same. Flying through the air now to the Star Bar, located in that very attractive tenement with the narrow rounded corner at the junction of Eglinton Street and Pollokshaws Road. This little snapshot of the lounge dates to 1940 and shows a well-ordered frontage with the main bar sneaking into shot on the right. Sometimes, when looking at these old photos, it's hard to know for sure what part of a building you are looking at. But if you look at the windows on the first floor, you can see two single windows with a close below and a double window on the right. The same arrangement can be seen in Google's Modern Street View and lets us see exactly what part of the premises was the Star Lounge in the old days. Sadly, what looks like an interesting old exterior would appear to have been lost under a modern coat of harling. A very interesting old pub now in Glasgow city centre. It's the Rabbie Burns Bar in the Trongate in 1938. There's a lot of stuff going on in that frontage. Everything from carved wood and acid-etched glass to signs informing us that the bar was selling its famed snacks for fourpence. It's a lovely little pub. Does anyone know what that big button thing is on the right-hand side? Today, I'm afraid it's no longer a pub, and once again the only sure way of identifying exactly where it was is by examining both the first floor window design and arrangement along with the position of the alley on the left. Another glorious little pub that is no longer a pub. It was located in Renfield Street. The photo, dating to 1922, shows a well-ordered frontage with no frills. You can see Sauchiehall Lane on the right. Again, pay attention to the windows above the pub. 3 windows, the middle one being narrower than the other 2. For this is the premises today. A well-loved Glasgow pub now, Lauder's in Sauchiehall Street, seen here in 1930. It's an interesting photo because Lauder's appears to occupy almost the whole of the ground level of 2 tenement blocks. It's also interesting because the photo shows the building on the left, which is no longer there. But what's probably most interesting of all is the presence of scaffolding at the entrance. Perhaps Lauder's is one of those places destined to be forever encased in scaffolding, because these days the whole building is covered in the stuff and totally out of sight. The Blytheswood Bar, close to Central Station, in 1933. These days it's a Toby Jug. Yet another pub where you have to look twice to confirm it's the same premises. The two fluted columns on the first floor are good for getting your bearings re where everything used to be. Back in the old days, the entrance was in the middle. One of very few pubs that really hasn't changed a great deal over the years. This is the Blaine Valley in Glasgow Street in 1931, and I think that wooden frontage goes way back, possibly into the 19th century. Tenants 90-shilling pale ale. I wonder what that was like. OK, so we're heading towards Partick now, and my home turf. Here's the University Bar, opposite Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum, at some undetermined date, probably the 1920s. At some stage it changed its name to the Regal, as seen here in the 1930s. Again, the position of the windows on the first floor of the tenement allows us to accurately picture where things used to be. As you can see, the left-hand door has changed position. The pub's name also changed, this time to the Regent Murray, and today the premises are no longer a pub. Now in deepest Partick, with an excellent photo of the Victoria Bar on Dumbarton Road. The photo dates to 1931 and shows a bright, airy pub with window displays for what we presume was whisky. The pub still exists and still bears the same name, but the frontage looks very different. OK, so does anyone know Greg's the Baker's in Partick? At the Dumbarton Road end of Peel Street? No? Well, this is how it looked in 1931 as the Western Bar. And the utterly amazing thing about this frontage is you can still see a ghost of it today. Look! The Western Bar letters are still there, along with that wonderful old advert for Regalia Highland Whisky. Greg's shop floor is on the right, a real glimpse of the past. Just along Dumbarton Road now, and the Hayburn Vaults, again in 1931. And while today the name has changed, the exterior of the pub has changed not one jot, looking quite wonderful with all that carved wood. Moving further along Dumbarton Road, and we bump into the Windsor, again in 1931. That, I have to say, is a very attractive frontage, with tiling and acid-etched windows. You can see the entrance to the Rosevale Cinema on the left. But this pub is not the Windsor Tavern that exists today, for the old pub premises are now occupied by a tattoo artist, and today's Windsor Tavern is on the right of the close. At one time the Windsor Tavern was much larger and did occupy both the current pub and the tattoo premises to the left. A mere spit away from today's Windsor Tavern is the Rosevale, pictured here in 1931 and my dad's local in the 1960s. What we can see here is an exterior mix of granite and wood carving, and really a very fine-looking pub indeed. It is, thankfully, still a pub, although the entrance has been moved about a bit over the years. And finally, to the Thornwood, close to the Thornwood roundabout. The photo dates to 1939 and, I have to say, that facade looks a bit plain, probably following Art Deco principles of straight lines and, well, not much else really. But the Thornwood is very much an exception to our rule that most modern pub frontages don't look as good as those in the old days. For today, the exterior is very, very appealing. That is the sort of pub you'd want to go in. And let's do just that.
Well, that was what happened to some of Glasgow's old pubs. And as I think I probably touched on in the voiceover, while in most cases today's pub, if the premises are still a pub, in most cases exterior just doesn't look as good as it used to. But there are exceptions, and this is one of them. I'm in the Thornwood bar in Partick, and as I think we've seen, the exterior looks far nicer than it once did. And the interior doesn't disappoint either. I'm Eddie Burns. Take care.